If I had to put in order of preference writing, recording or performing, I think without shadow of a doubt I would say performing, because that is for me where the music makes sense. For me, music is something that is intangible, and I like the beauty of the fact that it's moving in time and you can't nail it down and you can't pin it down. And I always think that songs are at their most beautiful when they're performed live, and then it just passes by you on the air and then it's gone. And you have one of those sensations of, that was a beautiful moment in time and it passed through me and it's gone. And sometimes when you're just driving around, you have a sensation like that of just being overwhelmed by something beautiful, and then that feeling, it's like a lovely taste in your mouth, is just gone. And that's why music is endlessly fascinating and untamable to me. So that is why the performance of music would come first, but also because it's such an enjoyable thing for me, and to see the enjoyment that it can give very directly. You know, when you make a record, you don't actually see the reaction of people when they're listening to that record or what it does for them, but when you're playing in front of people that are visibly getting lost in the moment, and you are too, it's a really uplifting and life-affirming experience, I think, and can be for everyone. I know that if I've gone to see a live performance and it's been an incredible one, I feel changed afterwards. I feel like I want to change my life. I want to make my life take it on a different path in some way, because that person that I saw performance inspired me so much and opened up my heart to all these possibilities that I never had before. So that's why performance is sort of top of my list of what music is about, really. And I don't even like the word performance, just the happening of music at that moment in time, rather than playing a recorded piece of music. But then, so second on my list would be writing, again, because it's something that happens in a moment in time. When an idea is forming, it seems to come from nowhere and it seems to pass through you, and you miss catching it and it's gone. If you catch an idea, a bit like with a butterfly net or something, and you catch it, then it kind of moves through you and changes and becomes something else, and all that is so exciting as a writer, because you're moving with it in time. So this idea is you're moving with it, making it happen, shaping it, and then the time's gone and then it's finished, and then you'll never write that piece again. That quality of life and death of a piece. Whereas recording would come last for me, because I find it a very painful experience, very difficult, very draining. I lose all my energy, everything is channeled to it. I find it hard to concentrate on anything else. It's racking in the sense that you have to keep questioning yourself over and over again. Is this right? Is that the best it could be? Was this right? And then the fact that when you finally arrive at something you think you're happy with, and you think, because you're never quite 100% sure, or I'm not, then you have to, at some point, stamp that in time and say, okay, it's the best I can do for now, and forever live with that piece. You don't get to change it again. So that would come the last of the things to me. I'm notoriously bad at making final decisions anyway, so having to make a final decision is quite on something being as good as it can be very difficult. The time period that this album was written over was very large, really, because I'm somebody that I write quite a lot of the time, so I end up with quite a backlog of songs, and then when I come to record an album, I just select which songs feel right according to how I'm feeling, what kind of record I want to make, what songs are interesting me most at that moment. So some songs for this new record were pulled from being 2 years old. Some songs were written a couple of months before I started recording, so it's quite a mixture, and of all different times in my life. So 2 years ago I might have been living somewhere entirely differently to where I am now, but I like the fact that the songs coming from different eras then have very, very different qualities. So I think on this record in particular, there's a lot of very different moods going on, but the common thread being that they were all finally finished off in the same environment and maybe brought up to date with the additions that I made, but these songs came from over a couple of years of writing, really. The role of a producer in a recording is a very, very important one, and I've worked with 2 or 3 different producers in my time, and they have an enormous impact on the way the record turns out. I mean, obviously a lot of it is with me. I'm thinking now of producers I've worked with in the past, which is Flood and Steve Albini, and then with Mick Harvey and Rob Ellis on the last album, Stories album. Having a producer is having someone to bounce off of. So if you're unsure of something, you can really ask their opinion, or if you're tired one day, you can lean on them and just say, look, can you just steer the ship today because I'm exhausted and I can't think straight. But they're a sounding board for your ideas, they're a suggester of ideas that you never would have thought of yourself, an eye-opener when you can't see for mist. So they're a very large influence. And not only that, but different producers have very much their different sound. Flood has a sound that I can recognise he's produced something before I've read that he had or anything. Brian Eno's another one. Daniel Lenoir, you can hear that's a Daniel Lenoir production. So it's an enormous role. And I've always, since I started making records, which is 12 years ago, my ambition was to one day feel confident enough to produce my own album without anyone else's help. And this was the first time that I felt that I had reached that position, that I felt confident enough in myself as a human being that I could carry out my ideas and hopes and wishes for the record. I did have quite a role in the engineering of the record as well, because many of the songs were recorded at my home on my 4-track or my 8-track, both of which are quite simple machines. I'm somebody that likes using very simple machinery, nothing particularly very technical. I like the beauty of the simplicity of it. So most of the recordings I had taken to a point where they were finished apart from the drums, basically, and then chose to take that into the studio, transferred it onto a 24-track machine, and worked on top of it, adding drums, maybe redoing some vocals if the sound I wasn't happy with, rewrote a couple of songs. 2 of the songs were restarted from scratch because it's very difficult for a drummer to play on top of things that are already played, particularly if they're done without a click. So a lot of the songs weren't, they were just sort of free floating, and poor Rob Ellis had to try and free float with me on this thing that was already recorded. So there was a couple of times where that didn't work out and we had to start from scratch, but most of the songs were already almost completed by myself at home, and then the finishing touches were done in a studio. For a long time I've wanted to have an album's artwork that was purely pictures of me, and me. No. Since I was at art college, and I think it's quite an art college obsession of oneself and examining one's inner self. And I remember when I was at art college, I was casting myself in plaster, and I think it's something that everyone at art college goes through. So since then, I'd always regularly taken pictures of myself in the mirror, I guess to document the changes over the years, and you can see yourself getting older, and you can remember exactly that moment in time when you took that picture and how you were feeling. And so it was a sort of tradition I'd started when I was at art college. And when I was thinking about the artwork for this record, years before, I thought, one day I'd just like to have this whole collection of my self-portraits for artwork. That would be really important to me, a document of my journey to this point. And like I was explaining about how I've only just felt at the point in my life where I could produce myself and trust in that, produce my own record and make it entirely myself, then this felt absolutely the right record to document my journey to now. And I've made it in a very simple way, and that was something I discovered making it, that left to my own devices and my own production, I choose to make things sound simple, lo-fi, just not like how I even thought I might do. I thought producing my own record, I might kind of make them all sparkly and brush them up a bit. And I found that every time I tried to do that, I just took it all away again. I didn't like it. Everything I was to get away from the songs, and discovered that actually even when I come to produce a record, they basically sound like my demos do, which is sparse, homespun, raw and sort of messed up, not quite right, something a bit not quite right about it. And that's what I discovered with this, is that, well, actually, that is how I like to hear things. I actually didn't realise that before. I thought it was just the way I made my demos, and I put down that strange soundingness of them to the fact that they were not finished. But then this whole record has ended up sounding a bit like that, and it's a very homemade sounding record, I think. And so then again, the artwork being a mishmash of things that had been homemade over the last 20 years, some of the pictures are quite old, felt entirely appropriate for it. Having said that, I chose as my assembler of my pieces Maria Moknash, who I've worked with again for the last, since I was 17, 18. So she is part of my life and part of my journey, and she felt like the person that I could safely hand into the lab all these ideas I had for the artwork, and knowing that she knew me inside out as a person, she could assemble it in a way that she felt presented the images best. Because I think that's something I didn't want to be the producer of the artwork totally. I felt that I did need an outside opinion to make it work for other people to view. Basically, when the song is working its magic on you, you know that it's complete and doesn't need anything extra. Having said that, there were songs that were already working their magic on me, and for some reason I thought, but I can't just leave it like that, because it would only be 3 things on it, a keyboard, a voice, and a strange plinky sound in the background or something. And I thought, well, I must try other things. And so there are a few songs where I tried putting everything on it, only to realise I just took it all away again, just to leave it as it first was. And so, yes, you do know when a song is finished, because it moves you in some way. It makes you excited, or it makes you laugh, or it makes you feel like you've gone right inside yourself. Yeah, a song's finished when it stands up on its own as well, and it stands outside of you, and it becomes something in its own right. It doesn't have to be attached to you anymore. It doesn't need its umbilical cord or whatever to you. It just suddenly floats off on its own as, oh, there it is, it's done its thing and it's finished. I think as a person and as a writer, I thrive on extremes, and I feel inspired by extremes in life. That has often taken me to various parts of the globe, searching for something that's going to throw me into the new and into the now, and taking me away from where I was born, where I grew up, and everything English that I know. So I've often done that, and there's many places I'd like to go to still in the future. With the last record, for instance, I did spend some time in New York, which is almost the complete opposite to my home in Dorset, which is very quiet and very removed and surrounded by wonderful nature and scenery. So it was almost the opposite to that. And then, and again, now I find myself here in Los Angeles as an opposite to New York almost. That again, I've moved that way a bit further, and it's inspired me in different ways. Again, it made me look at things in a different light. Next stop, Russia, that's what I say. Well, this record was recorded mostly at my home in Dorset. Most of the songs reached an almost completed level there. And then I decided to then transfer these original 8-track and 4-track tapes to a 24-track machine. And I did that in the neighbouring county of Devon, to where I live in Dorset. So it was just like a half-hour drive every day for myself. And again, I mean, I think that the beauty of recording it there was that it maintained the quality of feeling that the home recordings already had, because it was still very remote, nothing anywhere, no shops, no houses, just a house on a hill. And so in some ways it left the canvas completely clean for me to paint my own picture. There was nothing, no outside influences going in at that time of finishing the record, other than this is just what I'm doing. There was no outside distractions. And I was free to concentrate entirely on continuing the atmospheres that were captured on the home recordings. This was a very difficult record to make, probably because I chose to produce it myself, meaning that I didn't have the luxury of somebody else to shoulder my doubt or worries. So I shouldered them all myself. And it was a completely draining, disorientating, exasperating, invigorating, exhilarating experience, all wrapped up into one. And I would do it again. I would go back in there and do it again, but it was one of the hardest pieces of work I've ever done. Yeah. The only other hardest piece of work I ever did was when I produced a record for somebody else. And I do think producing is really, really hard. And I now have complete respect and admiration for the producers that I work with, so much more than well, I did before, but now I realise the extent of what they do. And both times I've produced records, this one for myself and the other one for my friend Tiffany Anders, nearly killed me. I couldn't say that this record was an enjoyable experience. I think it was a journey that I learnt an enormous amount from. There were enjoyable moments. I mean, certainly when a song starts to work, what we're talking about how when a song works its magic and is finished, those times are magical and so exciting and life-affirming, and so those times are very enjoyable. But if I was to percentage that, I don't know, that might happen 2% of the time, and then 88% of the time, 98% of the time, it can be just constantly hard work, really. But I am someone that does enjoy that. I enjoy being completely occupied by work. So it was a mixture. I mean, when I look back on it now, I would say it was a really difficult, hard, taxing time. And yet, I'm so glad I did it, so glad. And I came out with something that I feel was as good as I could have made it at that time. So the other people that I chose to work with me on this record, and that was a very difficult process actually, because I knew I wasn't competent enough as a drummer to play the drums. I played drums on a couple of songs, but they're very easy songs to play on. But I knew I needed a drummer because I wanted the songs to have that extra dynamic to them. There was no question who that would be. It was Rob Ellis, who I've worked with since the first album, and we've worked together for so long that we don't even need to communicate about what we're looking for in music. We're just on the same wavelength completely. So that was not a question. I toyed with the idea of bringing in other players, but then again, when I decided to produce it myself, I thought, well, why not go the whole way and just play everything myself too? So in the end, I played all the instruments apart from the drums, and because then this record seemed to be taking me down staying in this very intimate, homemade kind of feel, I chose to have as my engineer Head, who again I've worked with since I was 21, knows me, is my friend, is the kind of person that I don't have to communicate with for them to understand me or what I'm wanting. Once I'd got the nature of what I wanted to make clear in my head, it was very easy to choose just those two people to work with as the minimum amount of people other than myself I needed, and the people that would not in any way disrupt my own direction. Once I knew that this felt like the right time to make a record that's very close to my heart with as little interference from the outside as possible, then the objective became to maintain that feeling of the intimacy of my home recordings and to be true to the songs in terms of not putting things on them for the sake of it, taking away anything that wasn't needed. The objective was that for the whole record, the most important thing was my voice and my story. As long as the story of the song comes across, it's working. If I could be as a listener, and this, in the old sense of the word, the way music used to be, was storytelling. People would play music to tell stories to each other, and I wanted my stories to come across the best that they could. That meant taking out anything that was getting in its way. So that was the objective, so that my story and my song came across clearly to the listener and myself. And with every album I have a different objective, really. I think on the last album, on Stories, my objective was to make a very, very melodic, very lush, layered sounding record using many instruments, many melodies, and I wanted it produced in a very clear, clean, spangly, bright way. If you play that record against this new one, they're like opposite sides of a coin almost, and that is kind of sums up the way I work really easily, because everything, according to the last thing I did, I want to going back to what I was saying about extremes, I want to go to the extreme of how much different can I do this time, and I think that that's a base level that I measure myself against in order to try and keep myself producing new material and not just repeating myself, which is something I live in fear of. I mean, obviously there's limits within that. I'm always going to sound like PJ Harvey, no matter what I'm doing, but how far can I push that in different directions that it's, yes, it still sounds like PJ Harvey, but doing something we haven't heard her do before. That's always my goal. But then so with album to album, that changes according to the albums that I've already made beforehand and what I'd tried to do with those. I think primarily when I'm making a record, I'm aware most of all of how it's affecting me, of how the songs are affecting me and if they are moving me in the way that I wanted them to. So I think the first person that I measure it against is myself, because if I'm not happy with the record, then I might as well not do what I'm doing, because you have to be true to your soul or you're not going to produce work that is honest and authentic. So that's number one. If that's not there, there's no point in me even doing this. So having said that, I do think as well that I'm aware of not just myself listening to those songs, but other people. Harking back to what I just said about the objective with this record being to get the story and the song across. So I did have one ear open to a listener outside of myself, that would this story come across to now? Is it clear enough for somebody that doesn't know the songs intimately as I do? And I would draft in friends to come and listen to things and grill them about it, because that's a great thing to do. Also, when you play it to a friend that you brought in the room, you listen to it with their ears. It's full of doubts, and so it makes you hear it differently, and that's very important too. So, like I said, primarily it has to be right for my heart, else it's not worth doing. I was involved in the Desert Sessions annual recording project that Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age arranges every year or so, and that was a very freeing experience. So I think that gave me a lot of confidence about throwing caution to the wind, if you like, and just seeing what happens, which I do think I took with me in the studio, especially on the songs that we worked from scratch and that weren't working on things that were already done. So, I mean, some of the songs on my record were recorded in so many different ways. Some songs I sang 20 or 30 times before I finally went, that's it. So maybe I did learn about that from working with Mark. Do I see my career as a series of discrete events or as a continuous journey? Well, I'd have to say I definitely feel like I find it hard to even use the word career, really. It doesn't feel like that at all, but I feel that it is it's definitely a journey through music. That is my life, really. So it's an ongoing, continually changing process. And the records that I've made are a reflection of that, I think. One informs the other. One informs how the next one will be. A record is informed by the kind of person that I am at that time in my life and what I've experienced. So, and also how I've grown intellectually, how I'm more, as you get older, you're more able to view different subjects that are outside of yourself in a different way. I think when you're younger, it all is so inside. You look so internally looking the whole time. And then as you get older, you're able to look much more outside of yourself. And then that brings in all these new strands of information that you can use in your work, no matter what work it is you're doing. Being a helpful person to other people, whatever. So yeah, it's just an ongoing process. It's not, my albums I don't see as very separate things from each other. They're all this line of exploration. The album is an album, and I choose not to talk about the songs separately from each other. I choose not to talk about the lyrics to the songs. The album is this body of work that is just out there now, out of my hands. It's for people to take what they need from it. I feel like I've done my role now, and I could explain what songs mean for me, but that's just one point of view. I think in some ways the songs are quite separate from me, and in the way that I like to listen to my favourite albums and project my own feelings and experiences onto those songs, I'd like that to be the case, that other people can have them now. They're not mine anymore. So I've got my own opinion, but I wouldn't want to influence other people with it. Well, yeah, last year I did a couple of short tours with a three-piece band, myself on guitar, Rob Ellis and Mick Harvey. And I think that doing those two tours was very enjoyable, but also I think having the simplicity of a three-piece lineup again maybe did contribute to my love of simplicity going into making this record, and just thinking, I'm just going to keep it really bare and really, really raw and simple, and just let the songs come across in the simplest way possible. I really am looking forward to playing this record live, but just playing live, I love the thrill of performing, and it's where the songs make most sense. So I am really looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to the fact that I'm trying out some new players that I haven't tried before, and that I'm keeping it quite a small band, either 3 or 4 piece. I'm not quite sure the way it's going to take shape yet, but I am very excited about the prospect of trying new instrumentation, new combinations of instruments than what I've done before. I have often been, and will be again, in the situation where I'll be performing songs that people haven't really heard yet. From some of our dates on the up-and-coming tour will be slightly before the record's out, and I actually really like playing songs to people and they don't know the songs. And then, in fact, in the past, I've often thrown in new songs that people don't know, and I like that because people listen afresh and they're kind of a bit taken aback and are usually quite quiet and listen, and I like that. I like that first shock treatment when you first hear a song. But at the same time, the recognition that you see when you're playing one of their favourite songs is unbeatable, really. I mean, that's great. That's just so nice to see, and especially when people sing along as well. I think that the fact that the last record did do very well for me, and a lot of people bought that record and heard it, has in some ways put me in a good position with this new album, because hopefully those same people will be listening out for what I do next and will want to go and hear it. And I hope that I will present to them a very different side of myself, and a very different quality of music and lyrics to what they'd heard before. So I suppose it's exciting to me to think that the people that bought the last record, what will they think of this one, because it is a very different step. I find I very quickly begin to think about the next time I'm recording and writing. After finishing a record, I'm almost immediately thinking about what I want to do next. So, and usually when I predict at this kind of stage, it's totally different by the time I get there. But at the moment, I'm extremely interested in exploring the idea of freeing myself up more in terms of not recording things that are so carefully worked out beforehand, but maybe that are more spontaneous, and maybe involving myself with other players a bit more and seeing what that brings, and taking songs into the studio that are half finished and that are more like sketches, and seeing how I finish them in a very small space of time with the energy and excitement of playing those songs live with the band really quickly, and nobody really knew the song very well. So that's kind of where my head's at the moment, because I think that I'm often frustrated with myself and in the way that I like things to be so in order, and knowing what I'm doing, and the song is completely finished, I know exactly how I want it to be. I'm very interested now at this stage in my life to try and break down that conformity that I've made myself over the years. When I started playing the guitar around the age of 18, because that was when almost immediately I began playing guitar, I began writing songs. I mean, I wanted to play them to people immediately. Any friend that came along, I'd say, listen to this song I'd written, and I'd play it to them. I wouldn't call it the confidence or the command, more than the overwhelming desire to perform this song to somebody. It was like this drive I am a performer, I think, first and foremost, or a teller of tales, and I want other people to hear them.